They said the account was dead, a forgotten relic from a defunct project. They were wrong. They thought I was broken, the wife they discarded after stealing my job, my reputation, and my future. They did not realize that obsolete $50,000 account was not an oversight. It was the bait. It was the key. And it was the first bullet in a war they did not even know they were fighting. My name is Alara Mason. From 30 floors up, Austin looks clean, sharp, like a circuit board gleaming in the Texas heat. This penthouse was the validation, the proof. I am a senior strategic analyst at Viridian Dynamics, and I earned this view. I earned this life, built from the ground up, pane by pane of floor-to-ceiling glass. Viridian was the future clean energy tech, and I was one of its chief architects. Everything was perfect. It was aggressively perfect. My career, which I'd started from nothing, was accelerating. My home was a sterile, beautiful sanctuary overlooking the skyline. And my marriage, well, my marriage was to Gregory. We had been married for 6 years. I met him in the trenches when Viridian was still just an ambitious startup. Now, he was an executive, the charismatic face of the company, all charming smiles and tailored suits. We were the power couple, the ones who had it all because we worked for it all. And then there was Chloe, Gregory's executive assistant. She was ruthlessly efficient, barely old enough to rent a car, and possessed an energy that vibrated at a frequency just high enough to set my teeth on edge. She was always helping. "Ilara, I moved your 2 o'clock dental appointment to Thursday," she would chirp, her email signature already gleaming on my screen. It conflicted with Gregory's quarterly review prep, and I knew you would want him to be focused. She managed us, not just his schedule, but ours. She booked our dinner reservations, reminded me of my mother-in-law's birthday, and seemed to know the contents of our refrigerator better than I did. It was an intimacy that felt intrusive, suffocating, but dismissing it felt petty. She was just doing her job, Gregory would say. She just admires you. I tried to ignore the subtle static she brought into our home. I had work to do. My focus was singular Project Oasis. Oasis was not just another product line, it was a revolutionary battery system. My baby. I had poured thousands of hours into the data, the projections, the strategy. It was the innovation that would legitimize Viridian, pushing us from a rising star into a permanent fixture in the energy sector. My entire professional reputation was staked on its success. Lately, the pressure had been immense, and the glass walls of my perfect life were starting to feel thin. The cracks were small, almost invisible. Gregory was distant. He would sit across from me at our marble island, scrolling endlessly, the blue light of his phone illuminating a face I suddenly felt I did not recognize. He blamed it on stress, investor relations, the burden of leadership. The late-night emergency meetings started piling up, 2, sometimes 3 times a week. "It's just this push, Alara," he would murmur, kissing my forehead, his suit already on at 11 p.m., just until we secure the next round of funding. Then came the second phone, a sleek, black burner he kept in his briefcase. "International work only," he had explained breezily when I found it charging in the guest bathroom. "You know how the roaming charges are." We did not have international clients that required that level of secrecy. I knew our client list. I wrote the strategy for acquiring them, but I nodded. I accepted it. The static was getting louder. Chloe, who used to dress in fast fashion basics, was suddenly wearing designer shoes. She carried a handbag I knew cost at least $2,000. In meetings she had no business attending beyond taking notes, she began to speak up. Last week, reviewing the quarterly projections, she had interrupted me. "If we factor in the cobalt supply chain volatility," she had said, addressing the room, "the scalability model for Oasis is actually closer to a 24-month ramp-up, not 18. The blood drained from my face. That specific calculation, 18 months versus 24, was from a private risk assessment memo I had written only days earlier. A memo stored on my private drive, intended only for the C-suite. Gregory was the only other person who had seen it. A cold dread, heavy and metallic, settled in my stomach. I felt it constantly now, a feeling of being watched, of being managed, of being slowly, methodically edged out of my own life. I saw Gregory and Chloe whispering by the elevators, their heads close together. When they saw me, they pulled apart, Gregory smiling, Chloe offering that bright, empty wave. It is the pressure, I told myself, grinding my teeth against the migraine building behind my eyes. It is the Oasis launch. I was just stressed. I was paranoid. I was the woman who had built her career on seeing the patterns no one else could. Yet I refused to see the one unfolding in my own home. Last night, things changed. The tension broke. Gregory came home early. He brought wine, the expensive kind we were saving. He rubbed my shoulders, his touch practiced, almost performative. "I have incredible news, babe," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "The board, they want to hear about Oasis. They have scheduled a special session, tomorrow morning, just for you." I froze. "Tomorrow, Gregory. The final data sets are not even collated. I need at least another week." "No, you do not," he insisted, his smile unwavering, his hands firm on my shoulders. "It is ready. You are ready." He was suddenly the man I had married again, supportive, ambitious, my biggest champion. The anxiety that had been strangling me for weeks finally eased. This was it. This was the breakthrough. "This is your moment, Ilara," he whispered, kissing me. "This is going to change everything." He was right. It would. I walked into the main conference room at 9 a.m. sharp. The air was cold, sterile, smelling of industrial carpet cleaner and faint, bitter coffee. The long, polished mahogany table reflected the fluorescent lights like a dark, still lake. The board was all there. 6 men and 2 women in dark suits, their faces impassive. Gregory sat at the head of the table, not in his usual spot next to me. He gave me a tight, encouraging nod. And in the corner, by the video conferencing unit, sat Chloe, her laptop open, poised to take the minutes. She looked up and gave me a smile so bright it was blinding. My heart was hammering, but it was the good kind of adrenaline. The kind that makes you sharp. This was my moment. I had spent all night reviewing the final data, the culmination of 3 years of my life. I plugged in my drive. My title slide lit up the massive screen, "Project Oasis: A New Horizon in Energy Storage." I began. My voice was strong, confident. I laid out the problem, the market gap, the unique chemical composition of the battery. I moved to the performance metrics, the successful stress tests, the projected 5-year adoption curve. "As you can see from the degradation analysis," I said, clicking to slide number 12. "The energy loss is less than 2% over 1,000 charge cycles, which is impressive." "Ilara, truly." Gregory's voice cut through my presentation. I stopped, my hand hovering over the mouse. He was standing up. "Thank you," I said, a little thrown. "If you'll let me continue to the cost analysis." "Actually," he said, walking to the front of the room, "I'd like to build on that point." He unplugged my laptop cable and plugged in his own. The screen flickered. A new slide deck appeared. It was my design template, my charts, but the colors were garish, the numbers altered. "What Gregory has put together," said our CEO, turning to the board, "is a more aggressive pivot based on Ilara's foundational research." I stood there, mute. Gregory started talking. He was using my data, but he was twisting it. He was presenting a different model, a cheaper battery, using lower-grade materials. It was less efficient, less stable, but the upfront cost was 30% lower. He was proposing a quick, shoddy product to cash in on the green energy buzz, completely gutting the long-term innovation that made Oasis revolutionary. "Gregory, that model failed the thermal stress tests," I interrupted, my voice sharp. He turned to me, his face a mask of calm concern. "We've run new models. Ilara, based on new findings. What new findings? I've run every model. That data is misrepresented. He clicked to another slide. It was my private risk assessment memo, the one detailing a 24-month worst-case scenario. He was presenting it as the only scenario, framing my careful planning as incompetence. As you can see, Gregory said to the board, Ilara's original projections were optimistic. They failed to account for supply chain volatility. That's a lie. The words were out before I could stop them. The room went silent. Gregory sighed, a deep, theatrical sigh of disappointment. He looked at me, not with anger, but with cold, clinical pity. Ilara, you're being emotional. He turned back to the silent board. The pressure of this project has clearly been immense, which is why, based on these new, more realistic findings, I've decided to personally take over the stewardship of Project Oasis. The air was sucked from my lungs. We need a steady hand to guide this to launch, he continued. And given her invaluable assistance in identifying these discrepancies, Chloe will be stepping up as the new project manager, effective immediately. Chloe looked up from her laptop, her expression one of humble, surprised gratitude. The little performance was sickening. I looked around the table. No one met my eye. Not a single person. They were looking at their papers, at Gregory, at the new, cheaper numbers on the screen. I had just been executed, and they were already calculating the savings. You can't do this, I whispered, the words feeling like sand in my mouth. That is my work. You stole my work. Ilara, Gregory said, his voice hard now, all pity gone. Maybe you need a break. We'll have HR discuss your options. Thank you for your time. He turned back to the screen. I was dismissed. I stood there for another 10 seconds, frozen, as he began discussing marketing timelines for a product that was a lie. I pulled my cable from the port and walked out. No one watched me go. The rest of the day was a fog. I drove home. I did not call anyone. I did not cry. I just felt a profound, echoing emptiness. The shock was a physical weight, pressing all the air out of my body. It was an assassination. It was a coup. And it had been planned for months. The late nights, the second phone, Chloe's new shoes. It all clicked into place, a hideous, perfect picture. I let myself into the penthouse. The silence was absolute. I called his name. No answer. Then I saw them. By the door. My 3 gray suitcases, the ones we used for Italy. My leather briefcase. My gym bag. All lined up perfectly. Like a display. I heard a sound from the kitchen, a glass clinking against marble. A low murmur of laughter. I walked down the hall, my heels silent on the polished concrete floor. They were there. Gregory and Chloe. They were leaning against the kitchen island, sharing a bottle of the $90 Cabernet I had been saving for this very night. For my celebration, Chloe saw me first. She did not flinch. She did not look guilty. She looked bored. Then her lips curved into a small, slow smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. She took a deliberate, slow sip of my wine, her eyes never leaving mine. Gregory, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. He turned, setting his glass down. His face was blank. There was no charm, no pity, nothing. Just an executive closing a deal. Ah, Ilara, you're here. My suitcases, I said, stating the obvious, my brain unable to form a question. Why are my bags packed? He picked up his glass again, swirling the wine. I've filed for divorce. The words hit me. A physical blow. I gripped the edge of the counter to keep my legs from buckling. Divorce. Just like that. The apartment, he continued in that same flat, informative tone, is my premarital asset. I'm sure your lawyer will confirm that when you get one. He was looking past me, at the skyline, at his view. You have 30 minutes, he said, finally meeting my gaze. The coldness in his eyes was absolute. I'm expecting company. After that, I have already instructed building security to escort you from the premises. As a trespasser." I looked at Chloe. She was examining her nails, as if this were all a minor inconvenience before her real evening began. 30 minutes. He had taken my job, my project, my entire professional life in the morning, and now he was taking my home, my marriage, my personal life in the evening, a coordinated, ruthless demolition. It was all gone. Everything. In less than 12 hours. I do not remember the drive. I do not remember checking out of the garage. I just remember the blur of the highway lights and then the sickly green, flickering sign of the La Vista Inn. It was a transient place, a box of beige stucco smelling of industrial bleach and old cigarettes. I paid in cash, my hand shaking as I signed the register with a name that was not mine. I locked the door, the cheap chain rattling, and sat on the stiff, polyester comforter. The shock was a physical presence, a heavy, suffocating blanket. I did not cry. I just sat, numb, as the sun came up. Morning made it real. The sunlight was gray, filtered through a dirty window overlooking a parking lot. This is a mistake, I thought. A horrible, theatrical, corporate mistake. I will call HR. I will fix this. I opened my laptop. My fingers, acting on muscle memory, flew to the company portal. I typed my username and password. Access denied. A simple, red, clinical line of text. I tried again. Access denied. I tried the internal email server. Access denied. They had been thorough. They had been fast. I checked my personal email. An email from Human Resources had arrived at 4:15 a.m. Dear Ms. Mason, this email is to confirm your immediate termination from Viridian Dynamics. I read the words, but my brain refused to assemble them. Breach of contract. Willful misconduct. Erratic behavior and instability. That word, erratic. The same theme Gregory had used. It was a narrative. They had written me out of my own life and replaced me with a crazy person. Panic, cold and sharp, finally pierced the numbness. The money. Our joint accounts. I pulled up the bank's website. I logged in. My heart stopped. Joint checking 0.00. Joint savings 0.0. I could not breathe. It was not just empty. It was hollowed out. I clicked the transaction history. One single wire transfer. 3 weeks ago. The entire balance. Every penny we had saved for 6 years, transferred to a private offshore account number I did not recognize. 3 weeks. He had been planning this for 3 weeks, maybe longer. While I was pulling all-nighters on Oasis, he was systematically bleeding me dry, moving the chess pieces for this execution. The affection last night, the "this is your moment" speech, it was all a lie, a final, cruel performance to ensure I walked blindly into the kill room. I needed an ally. I needed a friend. I grabbed my phone. I texted Sarah, our head of marketing, the woman I'd mentored. Sarah, something terrible has happened. Gregory stole my project and locked me out. He's left me. Please, call me. The message delivered. A moment later, the 2 check marks turned blue. She had read it. I waited. 1 minute. 5. An hour. The silence from my phone was deafening. I tried David, from engineering. We had worked on Oasis together from the first napkin sketch. David. Gregory just staged a coup. He's pushing a faulty version of Oasis. He's lying to the board. He fired me. Sent. Delivered. Read. Nothing. I called Megan, my work best friend, the one I had lunch with every single day. Straight to voicemail. Hey Meg, it's Alara. I really need to talk to you. Please call me back. Huh, she never did. They were not my friends. They were his colleagues. I was just the wife, a temporary attachment to the man in power. The power couple was a fiction. It was just him, and I was the accessory he had decided to upgrade. The final blow came not as an email, but as a knock. A thin man in a cheap suit was in the hotel lobby. He was a process server. He handed me a thick manila envelope, his eyes sliding over my wrinkled clothes with practiced disdain. I sat on the stained carpet and tore it open. My name was on the first page, listed as the defendant. Gregory was suing me. I read it again, the legal jargon swimming. He was suing me for defamation and professional reputation damage. He was alleging that I had intentionally attempted to sabotage Project Oasis by presenting false and unstable data. He was claiming my erratic behavior. That word again had jeopardized the company's pending merger, and he was seeking damages. It was brilliant. It was pure evil. He had not just pushed me off the cliff, he had built a public narrative that I had jumped, and he was suing my memory for the inconvenience. My hotel bill was due. I looked at my personal account, the only one he could not touch. $212. The car. It was the only thing I had left. I sold it. My silver Audi. The first major purchase I ever made for myself. I drove it to a we buy any car lot under a highway overpass. The man chewed on a toothpick, walked around it, and offered me $5,000 for a vehicle worth 8 times that. I took the cash. It felt like paper, meaningless. I checked out of the La Vista Inn and took a bus to the city's desolate eastern edge. I found a place called the Starlight Weekly Motor Inn. The sign was broken, half the letters dark, buzzing into the humid night. I paid the manager, a man with dead eyes, $400 in cash for 1 week. The room smelled of mold and stale smoke. The lock was broken. I pushed my suitcase against the door. That night, sitting on a mattress that sagged to the floor, I, Ilara Mason, a 30-something strategic analyst with a master's degree, ate instant noodles I'd bought from a vending machine. The next day, I washed my face in the rust-stained sink and walked to a nearby strip mall. I needed a job. Any job. I walked into a coffee shop. The manager, a kid barely out of his teens, looked at my resume. Viridian Dynamics, he read, his eyebrows shooting up. Senior Strategic Analyst, and you. Want to pour coffee? I'm looking for a change of pace, I murmured, the humiliation hot on my skin. He looked at me. The manager at the coffee shop looked me up on his phone. A single search for Ilara Mason Viridian was all it took. He saw the lawsuit. He saw the allegations of erratic behavior and sabotage. He told me the position had just been filled. It was the same story at the bookstore, the admin temp agency, and the dry cleaner. Gregory had not just fired me, he had poisoned the well. I was unemployable. I spent the next 2 weeks in a haze, watching the cash I got for the car dwindle. The $400 for the room was due again. I was trapped, defeated. I had nothing left but my suitcases, filled with clothes that represented a life that no longer existed, and one stubborn cardboard box labeled Archives. It was a box of ghosts, old projects, performance reviews from jobs I'd had in my 20s, relics from a person I no longer recognized. I sat on the thin, stained carpet of the motel room and opened it, the smell of dust and old paper filling the small space. I pulled out an old employee handbook, a framed certificate, and then, at the bottom, I found it. A thick, spiral-bound notebook with the old Viridian Dynamics logo, the one from before our big rebrand. It was from my internship. A wave of nostalgia, so sharp it felt like pain, washed over me. This was from my time with Arthur Vance. Arthur had been my first mentor. He was an old-school financial accountant, a man who still used a physical ledger and wore suspenders every day. In the sleek, modern glass box of Viridian, Arthur was an eccentric fossil. He refused to use the automated accounting software, insisting it was black magic designed to hide mistakes. Gregory and the other young executives treated him like a mascot, a harmless old man. But I had listened to him. He was the one who taught me to look beyond the surface. Never trust a spreadsheet that's too pretty. Ilara, he would grumble, tapping his pen on a printout. The prettier the graph, the uglier the lie it's hiding. Always, always double-check the numbers. All of them. He was brilliant, paranoid, and fundamentally decent. He was the one who signed off on my first promotion, telling me I had good eyes. About a year ago, just as Project Oasis was getting fast-tracked and Gregory was making his big move to the executive floor, Arthur died. A sudden, massive heart attack, the official email said. It was a shock. He had seemed healthy, if a bit stressed. Gregory had organized the office memorial, given a touching speech about Arthur's dedication, and then quietly outsourced his entire department, replacing his meticulous ledgers with the very black magic software Arthur had mistrusted. Gregory's rapid, unchecked ascent had begun the day Arthur was buried. I ran my thumb over the worn cover of the notebook. It was filled with my old, neat handwriting notes on market analysis, equations, flowcharts, and tucked between 2 pages, I found something I had not seen in a decade. It was a small, square, yellow sticky note. Arthur's familiar, spiky handwriting was scrawled on it in blue pen. It was a string of digits, a bank routing number, and an account number. And beneath it, one word, Chili Dog Friday. My breath caught. I knew this. It was an old inside joke. Arthur was obsessed with the chili dogs from a specific food truck that only came on Fridays. It became our code word for any data that was messy, indulgent, but ultimately satisfying. And the account number, I remembered it. Project Riptide. It was a research initiative from my intern days, a crazy idea about tidal energy capture. I had helped Arthur manage the small expense account for it. The project had been canceled years ago, deemed too expensive. The account should have been closed, zeroed out, and archived. I looked at my laptop, its battery at 9%. I had nothing. I was days away from being on the street. What was one more dead end driven by a desperation so deep it felt like instinct? I plugged in the motel's spotty Ethernet cable. I found the website for the small regional bank that Viridian used to use for its R&D accounts before switching to a major international bank. The login portal was archaic, a digital version of Arthur himself. I typed in the account number. My fingers hovered over the password field. I typed Chili Dog Friday. I clicked Submit. I expected an error. This account has been closed message. Instead, the page loaded. A simple, text-based account summary page appeared. Account holder Viridian Dynamics, R&D Riptide status active. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The account was active, but it had to be empty, an administrative oversight, a digital ghost. Then I saw the balance. Available balance, 50,000. I stared. I closed my eyes, rubbed them, and looked again. $50,000. $50,000. Not 0. Not 10. Exactly $50,000. My mind raced. Was this a trap? A mistake I clicked on the transaction history? The page was almost empty. Just small debits and credits from years ago. And then, at the very top, I saw the last entry. It was a deposit, not a large one. Just $100. The date of the transaction was 1 week before Arthur's fatal heart attack. My hands were shaking. I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes tracing the final line. It was a manual deposit, and next to it, in the memo field, Arthur had left a note, just 4 words. Rainy Day Fund, Burn Drive. Burn Drive. The words echoed in the tiny, silent motel room. It was not an accounting term. It was not a corporate phrase. It was a message. Arthur was telling me to do something. Burn what ACD. A hard drive, I looked at the $50,000 on the screen, then back at the cardboard archives box. If Chili Dog Friday was in that box, maybe the burn drive was too. I turned the box upside down, emptying its contents onto the floor. Old notebooks, dried-out pens, framed photos of my intern team, HR manuals from a decade ago. It was all junk. I sifted through the pile, my frustration mounting. Nothing. And then I saw it. It had slid under the sagging edge of the mattress. A cheap, plastic USB drive, the kind they give away at trade shows. It was silver, with a black cap. Someone, probably Arthur, had stuck a small typewritten label on it, Favorite Jazz. I almost laughed. It was so perfectly Arthur. He loved jazz. He hated digital music. This had to be another one of his eccentricities, but he had put it in my box of archives before he died. He wanted me to have it. My laptop battery was at 4%. I fumbled with the plug, jamming it into the wall socket, praying the motel's wiring would hold. The computer chimed on. I pushed the USB drive into the port. A window popped up. The drive was named Jazz. I opened it. It was exactly what it advertised. Dozens of MP3 files. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. Dave, Brubeck, Take 5. Coltrane, A Love, Supreme. I clicked on one. The tinny speakers of my cheap laptop filled the room with the sound of a saxophone. Disappointment hit me, cold and heavy. I was wrong. It was just music. I was chasing ghosts, connecting dots that were not there. This was not a clue. It was just a memory of an old man who liked chili dogs and jazz. I stared at the screen, at the list of songs. I was about to eject the drive when Arthur's voice echoed in my head. Never trust a spreadsheet that's too pretty. This was too simple, too clean. Arthur was a man who kept physical ledgers in a digital age. He was paranoid. He would not just hand over a drive. He would hide it. I right-clicked. I went to Properties. The drive was 16 gigabytes. I selected all the music files. Total size 700 megabytes. My blood went cold. There were over 15 gigabytes of unaccounted for space on this drive. I went into the disk management utility, a part of the system I had not used in years, and there it was. Unallocated no. It was a second partition, a massive encrypted partition that was hidden, masked to not appear on the main drive window. It was locked. A small window popped up, requesting a password. My fingers, shaking, moved to the keyboard. This was the lock. The $50,000 was the key. I typed Chili Dog Friday. I hit enter. For a second, nothing happened. Then, a new window flashed onto the screen, like a vault door swinging open. This drive was not called Jazz. Its real name was Dead Man Switch. It was not filled with music. It was filled with folders, organized with Arthur's meticulous, obsessive precision, internal memos, offshore, transfers, seek, drafts, audio. I clicked on internal memos. It was a trove of emails, encrypted emails, screenshots of conversations from Gregory's and Chloe's accounts. My stomach twisted as I read them. The truth was so much worse than I imagined. It was not just my project. Viridian Dynamics was a house of cards, a massive, staggering Ponzi scheme. Our revolutionary clean energy technology, it worked, but only in the lab, in small, controlled demos. It was not scalable. The real-world field tests were a catastrophic failure. The batteries corroded. The output was less than 50% of what we advertised. Project Oasis, my project, was a fiction. It was built on a foundation of lies. Gregory knew. Chloe knew. A small circle of senior executives knew. They had been faking the data for years. They buried the negative reports, fabricated new ones, and used the clean tech buzz to lure in hundreds of millions of dollars from investors. They were pumping the stock price, getting massive bonuses, all in preparation for one final massive merger that would let them cash out, billionaires, before the entire company imploded. Arthur found out. He had done what he always did. He double-checked the numbers. He found the discrepancies between the R&D budgets and the faked investor reports. I clicked on the audio folder. My hand was trembling so hard I could barely control the mouse. The files were dated. The last one was from October 12th. The day before Arthur's heart attack, I clicked play. It was a recording. Crackly, low quality. Arthur must have had a micro recorder in his pocket. I heard his voice, quiet but firm. The numbers for the thermal tests are fabricated. Gregory. You're lying to the investors. You're lying to the entire company. Then, another voice, smooth, cold, instantly recognizable. Gregory. You're a sentimental old man. Arthur. You should have just enjoyed your retirement. You shouldn't have kept digging. Then, a third voice, sharp, impatient. Chloe. He's a liability. Greg. He's been sending inquiries to the SEC. He has to be handled. A man his age. All that stress. It would be a tragedy. But a heart attack is believable. It's clean. I stopped the recording. I could not breathe. My vision tunneled. He was not going to the SEC. He was warning Gregory. He was trying to stop him. And they killed him for it. They murdered him. They planned it. I looked at the screen, at the folders, at the bank statements, at the audio file that was a confession, and I finally understood. The $50,000 was not an escape fund for Arthur. It was a contingency plan. A dead man's switch. Arthur knew they were coming for him. He planted this drive, this entire archive of their crimes, and he left a breadcrumb trail that only I, his old intern, would recognize. He left me a small, anonymous bank account with just enough money. It was not a retirement fund. It was a war chest. I closed the audio file. The sound of the cheap motel air conditioner rattled in the silence, but I could not feel the cold, the shock, the grief, the crawling panic that had defined my life for weeks. It was all gone, burned away by a white-hot, clarifying rage. They had murdered Arthur. They had murdered him, stolen my life's work, and destroyed my future, all to protect a lie, all to cash in before the empire collapsed. I looked at the $50,000 on the screen. This was not an escape fund. This was not money to start a new life. It was a weapon. It was Arthur's final calculated move. It was the budget for a war he knew he would not live to fight. And he had just handed it to me. The victim was gone. The analyst was back. I had $50,000 and a drive full of evidence that could burn them to the ground. But evidence is useless if you are dead, or discredited. I had to assume they would eventually trace the account, or that seeing me on the street, destitute, was not enough. They needed me silent. My first move was to disappear. The Starlight Weekly Motor Inn was a dead end. I withdrew $5,000 in cash, a string of small transactions from different ATMs across town. I left my suitcases, my old clothes, my laptop, and my old life in that filthy room. I walked out carrying nothing but the cash, the burner phone, and Arthur's favorite jazz drive. I took a bus to a different part of Austin, rented a small furnished studio apartment in a nondescript complex under the name Sarah Smith. It was anonymous, clean, and safe. I paid 3 months' rent in cash. My next move was eyes. I could not move, but I needed to see them. I needed to know their routines, their weaknesses. I thought of Arthur's funeral, the crowd of corporate suits, their faces arranged in polite sadness, and one man in the back, his face a mask of raw anger, Marcus Thorne, an ex-Austin PD detective, an old, grizzled friend of Arthur's who had never trusted Viridian. He ran a small PI firm now. He had been the only one at the funeral who looked like he had lost a brother, not just a colleague. I called him from my new burner phone. "Mr. Thorne," I said. "My name is Alara Mason. I was Arthur Vance's protégé. I believe his death was not a heart attack, and I have money to prove it." There was a long silence on the line. "I always knew that," he grumbled, his voice like gravel. "The ME's report was too quick, too clean. I wired him $10,000. I want Gregory and Chloe. I want their schedules. I want to know where they eat, who they meet, and every mistake they make. I want you to be my shadow. For 10 grand. They will not be able to buy coffee without me knowing what kind," he replied. While Marcus began his surveillance, I focused on the digital front. Arthur's drive was a snapshot of the past. I needed the present. I needed to know what they were doing right now. I spent $15,000 of Arthur's money, converted to cryptocurrency. to hire a white hat hacker I found through a secure, encrypted network. Her handle was Nyx. I gave her one objective: get me inside Viridian's servers. It turned out Arthur had left me more than just a drive. Nyx found a permanent backdoor he had built into the accounting software he so despised, a digital escape hatch. We were in. For 48 hours, I did not sleep. With Nyx's access and my intimate knowledge of Viridian's systems, we tore through their files. And we found it. The endgame. It was not just about the stock price. It was a massive merger. Gregory was in the final stages of a deal to sell Viridian Dynamics to a global energy conglomerate, a giant based in Zurich. The deal was worth hundreds of millions. He was selling them my revolutionary Project Oasis technology, a fraudulent, non-functional asset. He planned to take the massive payout from the acquisition, blame the subsequent failures on integration issues, and disappear with Chloe before the new owners realized they had bought a hollow shell. And then I found my own name. I saw the narrative they had built, the lawsuit, the HR complaints, the erratic behavior. It all made sense. I was not just collateral damage from the divorce. I was a key part of their exit strategy. When the new owner's audits inevitably found the discrepancies, Gregory's internal investigation would have already found the culprit, Ilara Mason, the disgruntled, unstable analyst, fired for sabotage. I was the scapegoat, the perfect pre-built sacrifice to cover their escape. The rage was so cold it almost made me laugh. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just a wife. They forgot I was an analyst. I had $10,000 left in Arthur's account, and I knew exactly what to do with it. The merger was not yet final. It required a shareholder vote. I took the remaining $10,000 and, through a series of anonymous, offshore proxy accounts set up by Nyx, I bought shares in Viridian Dynamics. It was not a lot, not enough to matter in the vote, but it was enough to accomplish one critical thing. It was enough to get me a legal, undeniable invitation to the upcoming virtual shareholder meeting. I was finalizing the purchase when my burner phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, the PI. It was a single file, a photograph, Chloe, getting into a limousine. Not with Gregory, with an older, distinguished man. I called him. "Who is that?" "Took me a day to confirm," Marcus said. "He is very private. His name is Henrik Baumann. He is the CEO of Baumann Global, the Zurich conglomerate." Her father," I whispered, my mind racing, connecting the dots. "No," Marcus said. I waited. "That's the main investor, the one leading the acquisition. Chloe is not just Gregory's partner. She is the daughter of the man they are trying to defraud." I looked at the drive. I looked at the shareholder meeting invitation on my screen. I looked at the picture of Chloe and her father. It was not just a Ponzi scheme. It was a family betrayal. And I had just found the lever that would bring the entire house of cards crashing down. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks from Friday, the merger vote. That was the finish line, the countdown clock for the end of the game. 2 weeks to systematically dismantle an empire that had taken 6 years to build. I sat in my sterile, anonymous studio apartment, the glow of 3 rented monitors painting my face. The victim was gone. I was an analyst again, and this was the most complex, high-stakes project of my life. I could not drop Arthur's drive yet. That was the kill shot, the evidence of murder. To release it now would be a chaotic explosion. Gregory would deny. He would fight. And the core truth, the fraud, the conspiracy, the killing would be lost in the noise of a simple financial scandal. No, I needed to control the narrative. I had to bleed him out, peel back his defenses one by one, and force him to make a mistake. A true analyst does not just present data. They create the conditions for the data to have the most impact. My first move was to shake the tree. I had Nyx, my hacker, identify the hungriest, most tenacious financial reporter in Austin, a man named Ben Carter, who had a reputation for digging into overhyped tech startups, from an encrypted, anonymous email address. I sent him a small, simple tip. I did not send him Arthur's spreadsheets or the audio files. I sent him something only a senior analyst would see. I sent him a direct comparison of Viridian's public quarterly earnings report, the one Gregory had proudly presented, and the raw energy output data from the Texas state electrical grid. The grid data was technically public, but it was so buried in bureaucratic servers that no one ever thought to cross-reference it. The numbers did not match. Viridian's report claimed a 22% increase in energy production. The grid data showed a 3% decrease. It was a small, elegant lie. One I had actually argued with Gregory about months ago. He had dismissed it as a standard rounding error. I sent the email with one line, "Viridian's numbers don't add up. Check the grid." It took 3 days. Carter published his story. It was not a bombshell, just a pinprick, but it was in a vital place. Questions arise over Viridian's Q3 output claims. The market did not crash. It just buzzed. Analysts started chattering. Financial bloggers started asking questions. The stock, which had been soaring on the merger news, dipped 2, then 3 points. The effect on Gregory was precisely what I had anticipated. Marcus's reports, delivered to my encrypted phone, were poetry. Gregory was unraveling. He called an emergency all-hands meeting, his voice described as frantic. He demanded to know who was leaking proprietary data to the press. He was hunting for a mole inside the company, never imagining the ghost was on the outside. He locked down the servers, a move that came weeks too late. In his paranoia, he made his first critical error. He fired 2 senior analysts from my old department, men who had been nothing but loyal to him. He accused them of disloyalty. He was cutting off his own arms, terrified of a threat he could not see. Gregory was shaken. Now it was time to hit the other pillar, Chloe. She was his partner, but more importantly, she was the bridge to her father's money. I had to burn that bridge. I had Marcus compile his surveillance. He had done beautiful work, not just the photo of Chloe with her father, Henrik Baumann, but photos of her with Gregory. Photos of them at a $5,000 a night resort in Cabo, a business trip they had taken 2 days after Arthur's funeral. Receipts for jewelry, bank records from the joint account Gregory had emptied, showing lavish purchases for Chloe. I did not include Arthur's drive. I did not mention the fraud. This package was not about the business. It was a personal, brutal message from one level of power to another. It was designed to show a father that his daughter was conspiring with a cheap, adulterous con man to lie to him. Marcus arranged for a bonded international courier to deliver the package directly to Henrik Baumann's private office in Zurich. No return address. Just a simple, unlabeled manila envelope. The fallout was immediate and silent. 2 days later, a press release hit the wire. So bland it was terrifying. Baumann Global and Viridian Dynamics have mutually agreed to pause the pending merger for further review and due diligence. Paused. Not canceled. Paused. In the world of high-stakes acquisitions, paused is a death sentence. It meant Baumann had found something, and he was politely, publicly, pulling his money off the table. Nix was monitoring their internal communications. The panic was instantaneous. I watched, in real time, as Gregory and Chloe exchanged a flurry of terrified, furious messages. She blamed him for being sloppy with their expenses. He blamed her for not being able to control her own father. The alliance, forged in murder and theft, was fracturing under the first real sign of pressure. I knew Gregory. I had been married to him for 6 years. I knew exactly how his mind worked. He had risked everything for this one. Massive payout. With the merger dead, he would not try to save the company. He would try to save himself. He would run. He's going to try to liquidate, I told Nix over our secure channel. He'll try to move the investor money offshore, the same way he moved my savings. I'll be waiting, she replied. We did not have to wait long. Less than an hour after the merger was publicly paused, Gregory initiated a high-volume wire transfer, $50 million, pulled from Viridian's main operating account, destined for a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, a shell corporation we had already identified as belonging to him. He was a cornered rat, grabbing the cheese and running for the hole. But he was too late. We had anticipated this move a week ago. The moment I saw the Bauman Global News, I had Nix upload a package, not to a journalist, but to the SEC's official whistleblower portal. It was an anonymous, detailed, and devastating report. It did not contain the murder. It contained the fraud. I gave them Arthur's spreadsheets. I gave them the internal emails. I gave them the discrepancy between the R&D budgets and the faked performance data. And I gave them the account number for Gregory's Cayman shell, predicting he would use it. The transfer was flagged. The SEC, already primed by my detailed report, put an immediate freeze on all of Viridian's major accounts, pending a formal investigation. Marcus's final report of the day came in. Gregory, driving his Porsche, had sped to the bank, then to his lawyer's office. He was seen shouting into his phone in the parking garage. He was trapped. The merger was dead. The stock was in free fall. And the $50 million he had stolen was frozen, locked in an evidence vault, just out of his reach. He had nowhere to run, and he had no one to blame but the erratic ghost he thought he had destroyed. A cornered animal does not think. It just reacts. It lashes out. I knew Gregory. With his money frozen and his escape route cut off, he would stop being a strategist and start being a predator. He would look for someone to blame, and his paranoia would finally lead him to the one person he thought was too weak to fight back. He would come for me. I had left a breadcrumb. When I sold my car for cash, I had to give the buyer a last known address. I used the Starlight Weekly Motor Inn. I knew Gregory, in his desperation, would eventually look beyond the corporate world and start digging into the scraps of the life he had left me. He would trace the sale. He would find the motel. He was arrogant enough to believe I was still there, trapped in the poverty he had designed for me. Marcus had been watching the motel since I left. A small, silent alarm. It paid off. My burner phone, the one I had not used in days, suddenly vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Gregory's. I'm here. At this disgusting place. We need to talk. Alara. Now. I was miles away. In my clean, safe studio apartment, looking at a live feed from a security camera Marcus had installed in the Starlight's parking lot. I could see him. He was standing by the empty doorway of my old room, number 212. He looked frantic, his expensive suit wrinkled, his hair a mess. He was the animal, pacing the cage. I let him wait. I watched him kick the door, his composure shattering. I watched him dial my number again and again, the real number, the one I had left in the abandoned laptop. Finally, I picked up the burner phone I had bought just for this occasion. I dialed his number. He snatched the phone up on the first ring. Ilara, where the hell are you? I'm not there. Gregory, I said, my voice calm, flat. I watched him on the screen. He spun around, searching the parking lot, as if I might be hiding behind a car. What is this? What game are you playing? You did this. The SEC? Bauman? That was you, wasn't it? You stole my work. You stole my money. You destroyed my name. You left me with nothing. What did you expect me to do? He laughed, a sharp, hysterical sound. You did this. A coffee shop reject with a stolen laptop. How? You taught me, Gregory. You and Arthur. You taught me to be ambitious. He taught me to check the numbers. There was a silence. I could hear his breathing, ragged and fast. What do you want? Alara money? Is that it? You want the money back? And then, the switch. The predator turned into the charmer. It was the voice he used on investors, the voice he had used on me the night before the coup. Look, he said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate, conspiratorial. You're smart. You always were. You've proven your point. But you've made a mess you can't control. The feds are involved. This is serious. You and I, we can fix this. Together. I almost laughed. Together. Yes, together. Like it used to be. You have something. Evidence. Whatever you sent to Bauman, whatever you sent to the SEC, you must have more. Give it to me. Give me what you have, and I can make this right. We can pin this on the old board, the ones before Arthur. We can say they hid the real data from both of us. We can build a new narrative. I let the silence stretch, watching him on the monitor. He was smoothing his hair, trying to regain control, trying to manipulate the ghost on the phone. You're admitting it, then, I said, my voice as cold as ice. The fraud, the fake data. Ilara, don't be naive, he snapped, his patience breaking. It's just business. We can call it whatever we want, but right now, we can... I'm recording this. Gregory. He stopped. The words hung in the air between the anonymous studio and the filthy parking lot. I watched his face on the screen. The color drained from it. He looked at his phone, as if it had physically bitten him. What did you say? He whispered. I'm recording this conversation. The one where you just admitted to conspiracy to commit fraud. We can pin this on the old board. That's a good, clean confession. You bitch, he stammered, his eyes wild. You can't. I can, and I did. I'm not in that motel. Gregory, I'm somewhere safe, somewhere you can't find, and I'm watching you, right now. You look stressed. You should really fix your tie. He looked up, frantically, at the streetlights, at the windows of the other rooms, at the security camera mounted on the corner of the building, the one he had walked past 3 times. His eyes locked onto the small, dark lens. He was trapped. I had him. You think this is a game, he screamed into the phone. You have no idea what you've done. You've ruined everything. No, you ruined everything, you and Chloe, and you did it when you signed off on Arthur's death. The scream died in his throat. He went utterly still. The name, spoken aloud, changed everything. This was no longer about money. Arthur, he said, his voice barely audible. What? What are you talking about? Arthur had a heart attack. It was a tragedy. Was it, or was it believable and clean? Was that the word Chloe used I know about the $50,000 account? Gregory, the one Arthur set up, the one you missed. I know about Chili Dog Friday, and I know about the burn drive. I have the audio, Gregory. I have the recording of you and Chloe in your office, planning to handle him. He stumbled back, his hand over his mouth. He looked like he was going to be sick, right there on the cracked pavement. He finally understood. He understood that this was not a lawsuit. This was a murder investigation. He ripped his tie off, his face pale with a terror I had never seen before. I didn't. That was Chloe, he panted. I never ordered that. That was all her. It doesn't matter who said the words. Gregory, you were there. You benefited. You are an accessory to murder, and I have the proof. He was broken. The charm, the rage, the arrogance, it was all gone, replaced by the pathetic raw fear of a man with no exits. What do you want? He whispered, his eyes still fixed on the camera. Ilara, what do you want from me? You have a choice, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. One choice. You can go to the SEC tomorrow. You will confess. You will confess to the wire fraud, the securities fraud, and the conspiracy. You will tell them everything, and you will pin it all, every last piece, on Chloe. You will bury her. You will save yourself from the murder charge, and you will take her down for the fraud. And if I don't, he asked, his voice shaking, if you don't, if you try to run, if you call your lawyer, if you even breathe in Chloe's direction, I will take Arthur's favorite jazz drive, and I will walk it into the Austin Police Department, and you will both be tried for first-degree murder. The fraud will be a footnote. You have 12 hours to decide which one of you takes the fall. I watched him on the screen. He was shaking, hyperventilating. He knew, perhaps for the first time, that Arthur had not just died. He had been murdered, and he, Gregory, had built his entire future on that man's grave. He knew I had him. He knew there was no way out. He threw his phone to the ground, a useless piece of plastic. He scrambled into his Porsche and tore out of the parking lot, his tires screaming in the night. The choice I gave Gregory was a lie. There was no deal. There was no scenario where he walked away. There was only the illusion of control, a final strategic move to ensure he and Chloe would tear each other apart before the authorities even knocked. I knew he would not confess to save himself. He would run. And I knew Chloe, cut off from her father's money and facing the collapse of the merger, would immediately move to create a new scapegoat. The alliance was broken. The rats were turning on each other. Nix was monitoring their communications. The silence from Gregory after he fled the motel lasted exactly 1 hour. Then, a flurry of activity. He was not calling lawyers. He was booking a flight, a one-way ticket to a non-extradition country, leaving in 6 hours. He had chosen his path. I forwarded the flight details to Marcus. He's running, Austin Bergstrom, 9 p.m. He won't make it to the gate, Marcus replied. The SEC flag on his account means he's already on a federal watch list. I'll make sure the U.S. Marshals are there to greet him. Gregory was a solved problem. Now, for Chloe, just as I predicted, with Gregory silent and unreachable, Chloe made her move. At 6 a.m., an emergency email went out to the entire Viridian Board of Directors. Nix forwarded it to me. Subject: urgent and confidential emergency board meeting, 9:00 a.m. It was signed by Chloe. She was calling a meeting to discuss the severe financial misconduct and gross mismanagement by Gregory Mason, and to propose a motion for his immediate termination. She was going to throw him under the bus. She was going to sever the connection, paint herself as the brave whistleblower, the loyal executive who had uncovered her lover's devastating betrayal. She would use her tears, her youth, and her relationship with her father to try and save the merger, to save herself. It was a brilliant, sociopathic pivot, and it was exactly what I was counting on. I spent the next 2 hours preparing. I did not need to be in the room. My single share of proxy stock was my golden ticket. At 8:50 a.m., I sat in my studio, a fresh cup of coffee in hand. I opened the shareholder portal and clicked the link, Join Meeting. My camera was off. My microphone was muted. My name appeared on the attendee list as Proxy Shareholder 8819. I was just an anonymous number. Another small investor lost in the list. One by one, the board members appeared in their video windows. Their faces were grim. The CEO, the head of finance, and then Henrik Baumann, Chloe's father, joined from Zurich. His face was granite. Finally, Chloe's window lit up. She was in the main Viridian conference room, the one I had been humiliated in. She looked pale, her eyes red. She had dressed for the part a simple, high-collared white blouse. She looked like a victim. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "As you know, we have all been betrayed." The CEO, looking tired, spoke. "Chloe, the floor is yours. We understand Mr. Mason is not present. That's why I called this meeting," she said, a tear rolling perfectly down her cheek. I discovered that Gregory he's been lying to us. To all of us." She launched into a flawless, rehearsed performance. She was the devoted assistant, then the lover, blinded by his charm. She claimed he had manipulated her, forced her to sign off on reports she did not understand, fed her false data. She painted him as a master criminal who had preyed on her trust. "He lied to me," she choked out, looking directly at the camera, a message intended for her father. "He lied to all of us. He fabricated the Oasis data. He initiated the fraudulent wire transfer, and now he's run. He's a coward." She was good. She was almost believable. I have already begun cooperating with the SEC. She lied, to undo the damage he has caused. I am proposing an immediate vote to terminate him for cause and to begin a full, transparent audit. We can still save this company. We can still save this partnership. She was looking right at her father's video window. He remained silent, his expression unreadable. The CEO nodded. Thank you, Chloe. This is a lot to process. Does anyone have any questions before we move to a vote? Silence. The board was stunned, ready to accept this new narrative, this easy scapegoat. I unmuted my microphone. I have a question. My voice, clear and cold, filled the virtual room. Every face on the screen turned. Their eyes searched the list of attendees. Who is this? The CEO asked, frowning. Proxy 8819. My name is Alara Mason, I said. The blood drained from Chloe's face. Her eyes widened in pure, primal terror. She knew. In that instant, she knew she had walked into a trap. Alara, she stammered. You have no right to be here. You were fired. I am also a shareholder, Chloe, and I have a question for you. You said Gregory lied to you, that you were a victim of his charm, that you had no idea he was deceiving Mr. Bauman. Yes, that's right. He fooled me, she cried, her voice rising in panic. That's interesting, I said, because I have a recording that seems to tell a very different story. I clicked the share screen button. I did not play the recording of Arthur's murder. That was for the police. This was for the board. This was for her father. I opened a file from Arthur's drive. A different one. An audio file, dated 6 months ago. The sound was clear. It was Arthur's recorder, left running in his office. It had captured a conversation from the adjoining conference room. First, Gregory's voice, smooth and arrogant. And the old man bought it. He actually thinks the new battery is stable. Then, Chloe's voice, not tearful, but sharp, clear, and dripping with contempt. Of course he bought it. My father will believe anything I tell him. He's so desperate for this deal. He'll be the richest man in Zurich. A pause. Then Gregory's laugh. And as soon as the wire clears, he'll be the poorest. You're a monster, Chloe. It's just business, darling, she replied, her voice a purr. He'll get over it, or he won't. Either way, we'll be in Tahiti, and he'll be holding a handful of dead batteries. I stopped the recording. I clicked back to the video call. The silence was absolute. The board members were frozen, their faces pale. Chloe was staring at the screen, her mouth open, her mask of victimhood completely shattered, revealing the viper beneath. Then, one of the video windows went black. Henrik Bauman had not said a word. He had just left the call. The chaos on the video call was immediate. The board members were shouting, their professional veneers cracking, demanding to know what they had just heard. Chloe was a ghost, her face a mask of waxy horror, staring at my name on the screen. Henrik Bauman's window was the first to go black. He did not say goodbye. He did not make a threat. He simply vanished from the call. In the world of billion-dollar deals, that silence was a gunshot. The CEO was trying to regain control, his voice high and thin. Ms. Mason, this is highly irregular. You cannot just... This is unsubstantiated. He was cut off by an email alert that chimed on everyone's computer. I knew what it was. A new wire service announcement. I read it aloud into the panicked silence. Bauman Global has formally withdrawn its offer of acquisition for Viridian Dynamics, effective immediately, citing gross, undisclosed financial and ethical irregularities. The merger was dead. As the board members began to fully comprehend the scale of the financial ruin, that their golden parachutes had just gone up in flames, I sent my final signal. A one-word, encrypted email to Ben Carter, the financial reporter, now. He had the full story. He had Arthur's drive. He had the fraud. He had the SEC investigation, and he had the audio file of Arthur's murder. Ben Carter hit publish. The story did not just hit the wire, it detonated. Viridian Dynamics: A House of Lies, Fraud, Conspiracy, and the Suspicious Death of a Whistleblower. It was the lead story on every financial network. I watched the stock ticker on my second monitor. The SEC halt was lifted, and the market, reacting to the simultaneous news of the failed merger and the catastrophic fraud, began to trade. It was not a sell-off. It was an extinction. The stock, which they had pumped for years, went from $30 a share to zero in less than 5 minutes. The company was a corpse. The board call was still active, a symphony of panic. Chloe was still frozen in the conference room. Then, I heard a new sound through her open microphone, shouting. Heavy, running footsteps in the hallway. The double doors of the conference room burst open behind her. We all saw it on the live feed. Men and women in dark blue windbreakers, FBI, SEC. An agent walked directly to her. Chloe Bauman, you are under arrest for securities fraud and conspiracy. She did not resist. She just looked blankly as they pulled her hands behind her back. I watched as they arrested the other complicit executives in the room, the ones who had stayed silent, the ones who thought Gregory was the only target. My burner phone vibrated. A text from Marcus. It was a single photo, time-stamped 2 minutes ago. Gregory, his face a mask of disbelief, being led in handcuffs by 2 U.S. Marshals through the Austin Bergstrom Airport terminal. He never even made it past security. I sat in my anonymous studio apartment. I closed the shareholder portal. I closed the newsfeed. I closed the stock ticker. The room was silent. I had watched an empire burn to the ground. There was one last piece of business. I opened my laptop one final time. I navigated to the old, clunky website for the regional bank. I logged in, Chili Dog Friday. The account was still there, untouched. Available balance $50,000. Arthur's war chest. The $50,000 that had bought me my army a PI, a hacker, and a single share of stock. I had done my research. Arthur's wife, a quiet woman who taught music, was still alive, living in a small, mortgaged house. He had left her a small trust. I opened the wire transfer page. I typed in the account number for her trust. I typed in the amount $50,000. In the memo line, I wrote 2 words, from Arthur. I clicked submit. I waited for the page to refresh. The screen flickered, and the new balance appeared. Available balance 0.00. 0. I started with nothing, and I ended with nothing. Gregory had taken my penthouse, my career, my reputation, my marriage. He had taken every material thing I had. But he had not taken me. I closed the laptop. I left it on the table, alongside the burner phone and Arthur's favorite jazz drive. I stood up and walked to the door. I had lost my job. I had lost my home. I had lost my name. But as I stepped out into the bright, hot Texas afternoon, I had won back my life. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath. The air was clean. It tasted like freedom. My revenge was complete. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm so glad I could share it with you. Let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I'd love to connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.